inch deep pool of blood, dried blood, in the bottom of the dumpster. So even without being a medical examiner, in my opinion, it was an awful lot of blood, more than I typically see in a case.
On November 10th, 1995, 13-year-old Bradley Hansen vanished. He sneaked off to a friend's house without telling his mother and never came back. But this isn't just another missing teen story. This is one of the most infamous no-body cases that haunt generations of investigators in Arizona. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our new videos. Let's get started. Bradley Hansen was a typical teenager in the mid-90s. He came from a working-class family and lived with his mother, Rhonda Mishi, in Phoenix, Arizona. He had a solid group of friends at Centennial Middle School, but none as close as Jeremy Bach. Jeremy and Bradley were inseparable, spending time together before and after school almost every day. In November 1995, Bradley was very excited about Veterans Day, a popular holiday in America. His mother, Rhonda, didn't realize he had the day off from school, and Bradley had no plans to tell her. Instead, he and his best friend Jeremy carefully planned an adventurous day, keeping their plans a secret. When Veterans Day arrived on November 10th, Bradley started his morning like any other school day. He got dressed, grabbed a bike from a neighbor, and kissed his mother goodbye. Rhonda thought her son was headed to school, watched him leave without concern. But Bradley never went to school. Instead, he headed to Jeremy's house. With their parents at work and the day to themselves, the possibilities felt endless. We never know what they had planned, but it must be something mischievous. When Bradley arrived at Jeremy's house that morning, the boys were met with an unexpected obstacle. Jeremy's stepdad, Daniel. Like most parents, Daniel hadn't realized it was Veterans Day and assumed the boys would go to school. He went to work at around 7 a.m. With no adults around, Bradley and Jeremy had the entire day to themselves, an unsupervised playground for two adventurous teenage boys. However, their plans quickly got exposed at 8 a.m. when Bradley's mom, Rhonda, realized it was Veterans Day. She began paging Bradley, but he never responded. She sent multiple pages throughout the day, but Bradley simply ignored them. Rhonda, stuck at work until 2 p.m., grew more concerned with each unanswered message. While Bradley was no stranger to pushing boundaries, he always stayed in touch. The silence was unlike him and set off every alarm in her mind. Once home, she began searching for answers. She asked neighbors and friends if they had seen Bradley, but no one had. She called his classmates, but again, no leads. Finally, she reached out to Jeremy. Jeremy admitted that Bradley had been at his house earlier that morning, but he had left not long after, riding off on his bike. Jeremy didn't know where Bradley had gone or why. Rhonda told Jeremy that if Bradley wasn't home by 5 p.m., she would call the police. The call ended, but the mystery was just beginning. Rhonda called Jeremy's stepfather, Daniel. Daniel confirmed that he had seen the boys at 7 a.m. before leaving for work. He assured Rhonda that he would talk to his son as soon as he got home and update her with anything he discovered. But Rhonda couldn't sit idly by as the hours passed. She set out on a frantic search, driving to every nearby spot where Bradley might have gone, but found nothing. That evening, after Daniel finished work, he spoke with Jeremy as promised. But for unknown reasons, he never called Rhonda back. Despite knowing she was desperately searching for her missing son, Daniel chose to stay silent. Just after 5 p.m., Rhonda called the Phoenix Police Department to report Bradley as missing. However, Bradley's case was classified as a runaway rather than a missing persons case. Detective Sally Dillion believed Bradley was in his rebellious phase. Within a day or two, he would return home safely.
We thought he'd ran away from home, that he was staying with a friend, and, that in a day or two, 3, that he would return home.
The police obviously believed they knew Bradley more than his own mom. Rhonda fiercely insisted that something terrible had happened. Bradley would never simply run away. But police not only dismissed her concerns, but even advised Rhonda not to conduct her own investigation. Perhaps they worried about interference. That night, Bradley didn't return. In fact, he never came home ever again. Rhonda ignored the police's warnings. She spent the entire weekend reaching out to anyone who had known Bradley, hoping for the smallest lead. but no one had any information about her missing son. Except for a few of Bradley's classmates, most people seemed completely in the dark about his disappearance. After he vanished, unsettling rumors began to spread through the school, hinting that something truly terrible had happened. Some claimed a gunshot was heard mid-afternoon on the day Bradley went missing. According to these rumors, Bradley and Jeremy had discovered a firearm in the house that day, and Jeremy had accidentally discharged it. The shot supposedly missed Bradley and hit a wall. However, the rumors quickly took a darker turn. Someone claimed Bradley had used the weapon to take his own life. This was nonsense. There had been no indication Bradley was struggling with depression or harboring such thoughts. Rhonda didn't believe the rumors. But she couldn't ignore them. After all, rumors don't appear out of nowhere. She needed to find out if there was any truth to what was being said. On Monday, November 13th, Rhonda called Daniel Bach to discuss what she had heard over the weekend. Daniel dismissed these claims as baseless and reassured her that his guns were securely in their place. To double-check, Daniel called home and his girlfriend, Debbie, confirmed that the firearms were locked in the safe. Nothing was missing. This news eased Rhonda's fears. At least, the rumors were false. Shortly after that, Jeremy decided to speak with Rhonda directly. He told Rhonda that Bradley had left the house, worn his backpack, and rode off on his bike. Before pedaling away, Bradley seemed upset and said, "My life sucked." Jeremy's comment, along with the rumors surrounding the gun, only deepened Rhonda's fear and confusion. She now had more questions than answers. On Monday, November 13th, 1995, with Bradley still missing and unsettling rumors gaining momentum, the school decided to step in. That's when Anne Schelling became involved. Anne Schelling, one of the school's lead administrators, took an active role in trying to uncover the truth about Bradley's disappearance. That day, she spoke with Jeremy twice, along with dozens of other students who had any connection to Bradley. Through these conversations, Anne discovered a critical detail. There was another person at Jeremy's house that day. It was Taylor, a classmate of Bradley and Jeremy. Interestingly, this was the first time anyone mentioned Taylor's name. Anne only discovered this after speaking with Taylor privately. For reasons unknown, Jeremy had tried to keep Taylor out of the narrative. Anne decided to bring both Jeremy and Taylor together for a joint discussion. Under pressure, Jeremy slightly altered his story. He claimed that the last time they saw Bradley, he had ridden off on his bike, saying he would be back in about 10 minutes. But Bradley never returned. This was where things took a dramatic turn. The details of Jeremy's account, what he had shared with his parents, investigators, and now Anne, began to unravel. Jeremy knew more than he was letting on about Bradley's disappearance. Whatever he was hiding, he wasn't ready to share the full truth. Realizing that Jeremy's stories didn't add up, Anne decided to have a private conversation with Taylor. Taylor was remarkably forthcoming, even though she knew her honesty might land Jeremy in serious trouble. Taylor admitted she had made plans to meet up with the boys at Jeremy's house that day. When she arrived, she noticed Bradley's bike parked in the driveway. Something didn't match Jeremy's claim that Bradley had already left. When she stepped inside the house, Bradley was nowhere to be seen. What struck her as odd was Bradley's backpack, hat, and pager still sitting on the kitchen table, clear signs he hadn't gone far. When Taylor asked Jeremy where Bradley was, he told her that Bradley had already left. But Taylor wasn't convinced. Why would he leave without his belongings? Believing it might be a joke, Taylor searched the house, calling Bradley's name. She checked every room, expecting him to jump out laughing, but there was no response. Just as her doubt began to fade, something caught her attention in the laundry room. Bradley's shoes. They were stained with something red, like blood. Taylor's unease deepened. She continued searching the laundry room and found Bradley's t-shirt in the washing machine, also stained red. The shirt had a small hole in the front, raising even more troubling questions. Returning to the kitchen, Taylor noticed a few red drips on the floor. When she confronted Jeremy, he claimed he and Bradley had gotten into an argument, apparently over Taylor. According to Jeremy, one of them had called her a name, sparking a fight. Bradley allegedly struck Jeremy with a bar stool, explaining the hole in the shirt the red stains, and the spots on the floor. Yet, Jeremy showed no signs of injury, and Taylor couldn't shake the feeling that something more was going on. As she looked around, Taylor noticed a small hole in the kitchen wall.
He had left his favorite ski cap behind. Then, in the kitchen, she noticed a hole in the wall. There was also a reddish-brown stain on the floor.
Jeremy said earlier that day he and Bradley had been messing around with Jeremy's stepfather's guns. Bradley thought it was fake and accidentally fired a shot at Jeremy. He missed, and the bullet hit the wall. After the incident, Bradley ran out of the house, saying he'd return soon. Anne was shocked to hear Taylor's story. She didn't know if Jeremy was covering up an accident or if something far darker was at play. Anne immediately called Jeremy back in for questioning. Under pressure, Jeremy admitted to much of Taylor's story, but denied the part about a weapon and gunshot hole in the wall. He dismissed these details as rumors. Seeking clarity, Anne contacted Jeremy's stepfather, Daniel. He insisted that no weapons were used and there was no hole in the wall. He also warned Anne not to push Jeremy too hard, citing concerns about his son's mental health. By mid-November, Bradley's disappearance had grown increasingly troubling. Rhonda, Brad's mother, had already done everything in her power to track down her son, reaching out to friends, family, and even Jeremy's house again. Yet, Bradley was nowhere to be seen, and no updates from law enforcement seemed to be useful. During this time, Jeremy's behavior became even more curious. In literature class, while the teacher was explaining a horror story, Jeremy raised his hand and asked how long it would take for someone who had been shot to bleed to death. This seemingly out-of-place question, along with his prior behavior, raised suspicions. By December 5th, with no sign of Bradley, the Phoenix police decided it was time to focus their investigation on the last known witness, Jeremy. Officer Lissandro, along with school administrator Ann Schelling, arranged an interview with him. While there was no clear evidence of foul play, the police were looking for any clue that could explain where Bradley had gone. When Officer Lissandro asked about the rumors of a gun, Jeremy quickly denied the story. There was no gun involved, and he didn't know who started the rumors. Jeremy suggested that Bradley might have run to Tucson, Arizona, to be with a man named Poppy, or he might have gone to California to be with his father. These vague theories only deepened the officer's suspicions. At the end of the interview, Officer Lissandro took note of Jeremy's statements and left. But it was clear that Jeremy's story was not adding up.
There were parts of it that we had a notion were probably going to be true, and other parts that you could tell weren't. Times when he would make the eye contact and other times when he wouldn't.
That same day, the Phoenix police reached out to Daniel Bach, Jeremy's stepfather. Detective Stephen Lewis spoke with Daniel by phone, and Daniel again insisted that there had been no gunshot in the house and no bullet holes were found anywhere, including in the wall. He had checked the .357 revolver that was kept hidden in the living room under the couch cushion and assured the detective that no bullet was fired. The detective asked if they could interview Jeremy at his house, and Daniel agreed. It seemed like Bradley's fate was darker than anyone had feared. On December 14th, 1995, nearly a month after Bradley's disappearance, Detectives Lewis and Dillian conducted an interview with Jeremy at his home, under the supervision of his stepfather, Daniel. Jeremy continued to deny any knowledge of a shooting. However, as the detectives were speaking to Jeremy in the kitchen, they noticed a spot in the wall. It appeared to be a freshly patched hole, suggesting that something had been repaired recently. At this point, Daniel presented the .357 Magnum revolver that had supposedly been tucked under the couch cushions. He claimed that he had smelled the gun and could tell it had not been fired. This explanation didn't sit well with the detectives. The next day, on December 15th, Daniel went to the police station and handed over a bullet. He revealed that after the interview, Jeremy had confessed that a shot had been fired and hit the wall. Jeremy had dug a bullet out of the wall and gave it to Daniel. This new development led the detectives to arrange a second re-interview at Jeremy's house. When detectives returned to Jeremy's home, his story took a significant turn. Jeremy explained that he and Bradley had argued, and during the argument, Bradley grabbed a weapon and fired at him. The bullet missed Jeremy by inches and lodging in the kitchen wall. However, there was an issue with this explanation. The bullet hole was very low, much lower than Jeremy's shoulder. Detectives asked Jeremy to demonstrate how the shot happened, and his body language immediately shifted. He tried to bend down, struggled to align his shoulder with the hole. When asked if the bullet had been dug out from this hole, Jeremy confirmed it was. He also explained that he gave the bullet to Daniel after the detectives left on the 14th. This was a critical detail that raised more questions. If Jeremy had known about the bullet's location and had it all along, why did he keep that information hidden? At this point, the detectives took a break in the interrogation. During this pause, Jeremy sat alone with Detective Dillion. Jeremy leaned over and said, "You guys really think I did him, don't you?" Detective Dillion replied cautiously, saying that because Jeremy had lied to them in the past, they still didn't know what to think. Jeremy said, "If I shot him, it would ruin my entire life forever." The detectives knew there was more to the story, but without solid evidence, they were unable to pursue an arrest at that time. The case was far from closed, but they were edging closer to the truth, no matter how tragic or complicated it might be. By January 9, 1996, detectives Dillion and Lewis were no longer looking at Brad's disappearance as a simple runaway case. A gut feeling told them to seize Jeremy's house trash bin.
We really had nothing, so we tried to figure out what we could do, and the only thing that we came up with is we put them in the trash.
The trash bin was transported for forensic analysis, and what they found would prove to be crucial. When police opened the lid of the trash bin, they immediately noticed a strong odor of purification. Some form of cleaning or chemical agent had been used to mask a more disturbing smell. Inside, there was a brown pool of liquid at the bottom, which was later confirmed to be blood.
The dumpster was probably about 2 feet in diameter, and there was probably about an inch deep pool of blood, dried blood, in the bottom of the dumpster. So even without being a medical examiner, in my opinion, it was an awful lot of blood, more than I typically see in a case.
This was a significant breakthrough. Blood found on the outside of the trash bin was analyzed, and to the detective's shock, it was consistent with Rhonda Mishy's blood, Brad's mother. However, the forensic results did not immediately lead to any formal charges. As the days passed, more pieces began to fall into place. By February 15, 1996, the detectives learned that Jeremy had moved out of the Bach household and relocated with his mother to Las Vegas. The timing was highly suspect. Detectives contacted the Las Vegas Police Department to inquire about Jeremy's whereabouts and served him with a physical evidence order, requesting blood and forensic samples from him. This marked a significant shift in the case. It was no longer just about finding Brad, but about building a case against Jeremy. On February 16, 1996, both Phoenix and Las Vegas became the epicenter of investigative activity. In Phoenix, police executed a search warrant at the Bach home. They took the .357 Magnum revolver, a kitchen chair, grout, and wallboard from the kitchen area, where the bullet hole had been observed months earlier. In addition, investigators found a magazine and a holster for a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol. These discoveries confirmed that the weapon had been in this house all along, further linking the crime to Jeremy. At the same time, in Las Vegas, Jeremy's mother reached out to the Las Vegas Police Department, saying Jeremy wanted to speak about what had happened to Bradley. This voluntary cooperation was another key turning point in the investigation. In the recorded interview on February 16, 1996, Jeremy Bach confessed he accidentally killed Bradley. That morning, the boys spent time playing with Jeremy's father's guns. While handling the loaded guns, something bumped Jeremy's hand, causing him to pull the trigger. The shot killed Bradley instantly. On February 17th, Jeremy was extradited back to Phoenix, where he faced another round of questioning. And no one was prepared to hear what he was about to say. On November 10, 1995, Jeremy pointed the .357 Magnum revolver at Bradley. His hand bumped something, causing him to pull the trigger. The bullet struck Bradley, but he was still alive. Rather than seeking help or calling an adult, Jeremy began to clean up the crime scene. He wiped away the blood from Brad's stomach with a rag and turned on some music. He dug the bullet out of the wall and discarded it, together with the cigarette butts they had smoked earlier. At one point, Jeremy considered calling his stepfather, but backed out, thinking it would be too stressful. Then he planned to ask a friend to bury Bradley's body, but feared his friend would report the crime. While Jeremy was thinking, Bradley was dying, foam coming from his mouth and his chest heaving. After struggling for an hour, Bradley rolled over and stopped breathing. Experts suggested that there was more than enough time for Brad to be saved, but because Jeremy was more focused on covering up his actions, he failed to help his friend. Jeremy decided to put his friend's lifeless body into the family trash bin. He described how he almost folded Bradley's body so that his legs stuck out of the trash can. He left the lid open in case Bradley woke up and walked away. An hour later, Jeremy checked and saw that Bradley hadn't moved. He closed the lid. Jeremy then spent hours cleaning the crime scene, scrubbing away blood from the walls and grout. He washed his clothes and made sure to discard Bradley's backpack. When Taylor arrived shortly after, Jeremy's cleaning had already been completed, but Brad's bike was still in the driveway, and his backpack remained on the kitchen table. These small but telling details indicated that Jeremy's actions were calculated, not the result of a panicked response to an accident. For a full week, Bradley's body remained hidden inside that trash bin, undisturbed by anyone, until the trash collectors came and emptied the bin. How Jeremy's parents or the trash collectors didn't discover Bradley's remains is still a mystery. Phoenix police spent a significant amount of resources, nearly $100,000, searching the landfill for Brad's remains, but despite a thorough investigation and 2 months of searching, his body was never found. In 1997, 13-year-old Jeremy Bach made history as the youngest defendant in Maricopa County to be tried as an adult. The lack of remorse or any attempt to seek help for Bradley was a crucial factor in the prosecution's decision to charge Jeremy with second-degree murder. Expert rejected Jeremy's claim that the gun had accidentally fired from a simple bump.
What we do is take a set of weights and hang them from the trigger and keep adding on weight to the end of the trigger till it actually goes off, and that will tell us how much force was required for that particular firearm.
Expert determined that the .357 Magnum revolver required 10.25 pounds of pressure to fire. His analysis concluded that Jeremy intentionally pulled the trigger. Jeremy's lies, inconsistencies, and the fact that he kept the truth hidden for months ultimately led to his conviction. In January 1998, Jeremy was sentenced to 22 years in prison, despite being only 13 years old at the time of the crime. He was tried as an adult, a decision that drew a great deal of attention and debate. He entered prison in January of 1998 and was set to be released in December of 2021, meaning he is now a free man. But the most perplexing aspect of the case is the role of his parents, particularly his stepfather, Daniel. This is not an accusation, but how did the parents not notice anything out of the ordinary? Daniel claimed that he had inspected the weapon and even smelled it to check for signs of shooting. According to him, everything seemed intact. All ammunition was accounted for. But that was wrong. One round had clearly been discharged. Additionally, Daniel stated that all of his weapons were locked away in the family's gun safe. But this raises even more questions. Did Jeremy have a key or the combination to this safe? It's possible that Jeremy managed to steal the key or the code, but that doesn't explain how Daniel failed to notice the hole in the kitchen wall. Even more perplexing is the fact that, after the shooting, Daniel reached out to the investigators and told them that Jeremy had confessed to firing a weapon that day. He handed over a bullet from the kitchen wall. However, this couldn't have been the round that struck Bradley, because Jeremy had already disposed of the original bullet. Why didn't Daniel notice that 2 rounds had been fired from the weapon, one of which had hit Bradley? And don't forget about the trash bin. How could the remains of a boy, especially someone like Bradley, end up in that trash can for weeks without anyone noticing? Did no one take out the trash in 4 months after Bradley disappeared? Even if the trash was removed sporadically, someone would have seen the excessive liquid, or notice the strange drips down the sides. More alarmingly, did no one smell anything? It's hard to imagine how this could have gone unnoticed, especially in a household where adults were present. Bradley's family had realized all of these inconsistencies and pursued legal action against Jeremy's parents. However, there is little public information about the outcome of that civil lawsuit. This case weighs heavily on our hearts, especially for Brad's mother, Rhonda. It's beyond comprehension that her son, a young boy with so much life ahead of him, was taken from her in such a horrific manner. We hope that Rhonda was able to find peace, though the pain of such a loss will never truly go away. Ultimately, this case is a tragedy on every level. The loss of Bradley's life, the emotional toll on Rhonda and her family, and even the lasting consequences for Jeremy are all reminders of how delicate life can be and how the wrong choices can cause irreversible damage. In the end, we are left with the painful reminder that sometimes doing the right thing at the right time is all it takes to change the course of someone's future. What do you think? Could Jeremy's parents have played a role in his crime? We've also heard rumors about a possible love triangle connected to this case. Is that true? Please share your thoughts and theories in the comments. If there's a case you're interested in, let us know. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.